Welcome to our Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, regular closed session meeting of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors. In accordance with Government Code Section 54953, subsection E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar and teleconference only. A physical location will not be provided for this meeting. Please call roll, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
I'm here.
President Lenny.
Here. Thank you. So at this point, we're at public comment. Members of the public wish to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation, if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If we need this information, we will contact you about it. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time is concluded.
We will start, we have speakers. We will start with George Cleveland. And George, you should be able to unmute your mic and your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Excuse me. Good morning, President Lenny, members of the board, General Manager Chan, and other meeting attendees. My name is George Cleveland. I'm the Chief Steward of ASME Local 2019. I'm here to discuss the ongoing contract negotiations, in particular as it relates to our employees who are in the retirement system, who are PEPRA folks. Since the start of this negotiation cycle over a year ago, the Local 2019 contract negotiation team has been asking management to provide information on the differences in the compensation packages between the employees covered under the legacy retirement system versus those under PEPRA. And for this over a year time frame, we were repeatedly told that this information didn't exist, it wasn't available, there wasn't a significant cost amount, or there was some other excuse why the information wasn't provided. It got to the point that a couple of weeks ago, we felt we had no choice but to issue management an ultimatum to get the information. And last week, we finally did get that said information in an email with an attached memo that was dated March 9th, 2021. So management had this very important info for about a year, and we believe it was being purposely and purposefully withheld from us, which is most unfortunate. This action, in our opinion, could be considered bargaining in bad faith. So much so that we are considering filing an unfair labor practice against East Bay Mud because of this action or inaction, depending on how you look at it. Had we had the info in a timely fashion, it most definitely would have impacted our PEPRA proposals and how we were negotiating on behalf of those members and all of our members. And because of this action or inaction, and despite the district's last, best, and final offer, we demand that management come back to the bargaining table this Thursday, February 24th, to talk more about PEPRA. The district can and should do better for what now represents majority of its employees, because more than 50% of the district employees are in the PEPRA retirement system. So that's what I have to say today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, George. Are there other speakers?
At this time, I don't have any other hands for public comment. I have one. Give me one moment. Rivera, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Risha.
Your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you. I provided 3 documents to Risha last night. And the reason I'm providing the documents today is basically it's my quest to demystify the federal civil rights lawsuits that have been served against the district. The first document I provided may not have gone through because it was a large file, but I'm going to just read one paragraph from that DFEH position statement that AFSCME provided DFEH in response to my classification complaints. That statement said the substance of complainant's complaint appears to be related to a dispute regarding her job classification. Thus, any complaint against AFSCME is misdirected. AFSCME 444 is a labor organization and does not control the terms or conditions of complainant's employment. AFSCME does not have the power to provide complainant with a remedy. Only complainant's employer could do that. The second document I provided was the Pierce and Bland conference management schedule. So Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland filed, as many now know, a discrimination retaliation lawsuit against EBMUD, Craig Spencer, and Laura Costa. I have access to the federal PACER files because of my own lawsuit. And I could see that next Friday, if anybody wants to see what a case management hearing is like, the federal court has a date set. And I'm going to read from the federal court document, which I provided to EBMUD. Clerk's notice setting further case management conference that it's set for next Friday, 3/4/22 at 2 p.m. This proceeding will be held via Zoom webinar. An updated case management conference is due 2/25. Persons granted access to the court proceedings held by telephone or video conference are reminded that photographing, recording, and rebroadcasting of court proceedings, including screenshots or visual copying of a hearing, is absolutely prohibited. And anyone can join that Zoom hearing at the uscourts.gov site for Zoom. All you have to do is type in Pierce versus EBMUD, and that link will come up. I know I'm running out of time. I'll continue this discussion at the 1 o'clock meeting. Thank you for your time.
All right. I see another speaker.
Yes, next we have Joey Smith. Joey, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good morning to President Lenny, Vice President Coleman, Board, General Manager Chan, all staff, and everyone who is present. Disappointed is a very, very mild way for me to express my reaction to getting a document that was dated nearly a year ago, little more than a year after we asked for it. I am not in the practice of whining, bemoaning, and complaining to people over the heads of the people that we ask for information, unless we feel that we're not being heard or we're being discounted or disrespected. Our CNT, contract negotiation team, our entire local, as well as our coworkers in other locals, and even the non-represented, are worthy of better respect than what was given to us with that. I would like to believe that value of respect goes both ways. It did not this time. Please do direct the people from your side of the table to meet with us, because there are things that should be discussed. With that, I wish you a good rest of your day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joey.
Thank you. I see no other hands for public comment.
All right. We'll then convene to discuss closed session agenda items. We're scheduled to return for our regular board meeting at 1:15. All right, thank you. And welcome everyone to the Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022 regular business meeting of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors. In accordance to Government Code 54953E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar and teleconference only. A physical location will not be provided for this meeting. Board members participated in the Finance Administration Committee and the Long-Term Water Supply Workshop this morning. The Upper McCollum River Watershed Authority Board meeting on January 28th and the Los Vaqueros Reservoir JPA meeting on February 9th. These items will be reported out under item 14. Roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Here.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
I'm here.
President Lenny.
Here. All right, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no announcements required from closed session. So we're now on to public comment. If members of the public wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. And comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during the public comment. If we need this information, we'll have you contact staff. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allocated time has concluded.
At the moment, we have 2 speakers for public comment. Julia Housney, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members, General Manager Chan, and district staff. My name is Julia Halsey. I'm a recent retiree from the district, and I worked at the district for over 20 years. I'm coming to you today because I've witnessed firsthand serious issues that I see at the district that appear to be ongoing and have resulted in extreme frustration, including complaints and legal action against the district. Retaliation can be swift and harsh for any employee that dares to come forward to present an issue or concern to the board or management. Therefore, you will only see individual employees with nothing left to lose come forward. This results in the board to assume, and staff supports this, the employee issue is a one-off or a personality conflict, thus minimizing the individual complaint or concern. In my positions at the district, I've worked with all levels of the staff, from entry level to 2 previous general managers, the current GM, and the board. I've worked with the public sector, sister agencies, regulators, industry professionals, and customers, as well as participated in hiring, disciplinary actions, promotions, performance reviews, employee relations, and contract negotiations. As such, my experience has provided an accurate picture of the district's operations, administration, and management. In addition, I want to be clear, there are many things I love about my time at the district, and I've had the privilege to work with a lot of wonderful people there. It's why I feel compelled to talk to you about my experience and what I've witnessed firsthand. I will not talk about specifics in a public setting, but if you want to talk offline, I would be happy to do so. It is important that you know it is with a heavy heart that I come to you. The district has a well-known culture of the emperor wears no clothes and conflict avoidance. And I can count more times than I have fingers witnessed incidences where the don't ask, don't tell to management and operations has occurred, and often promotion and oversight of underperforming supervisors and managers has been ignored or marginalized. And has been previously stated by other public comments at board meetings, engineers appear to be capable of performing all positions within the district regardless of incumbent or other qualified non-engineer minority and women candidates. It is also the norm for managers and supervisors to not directly address performance issues or coach staff for performance and skill expectations. I have witnessed firsthand numerous recruitments with a predetermined outcome, a pre-chosen candidate based on known bias of the hiring supervisor, regardless of civil service status. I think this is evidenced in the resignation of many staff and retirements, in addition to the lawsuits against the district. These are not isolated or one-time events. It is prevalent in all departments and divisions. Honestly, the board and the GM have to accept their culpability in this culture and continued management style through their own approach and execution. I have enjoyed working with such great, hardworking, knowledgeable, and dedicated staff throughout the agency. I only wish the best for the district and a long-term culture shift for a self-described leader of the industry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julia.
Next, we have Nick Lawrence. You should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Is this mic on?
Yes.
Julia, that was awesome reporting. Thank you, Risha. And greetings, East Bay MUD employees, General Manager Chan, members of the board, legal department eavesdroppers, fire officials, posse members, the media, and concerned ratepayers. Welcome to a dangerous condition of public property still existing on Tappan Terrace in Orinda in the form of the still out-of-service East Bay MUD fire hydrant, H14100, connected as it is to a tiny 2-inch rubber hose. Nick Lawrence here, bringing you today's episode 13 called Delay, Deny, Deflect. Continuing its pattern of obfuscation, delay, and denial, just like that unpopular politician, East Bay MUD continues to blame lack of easements for its failure to remedy the dangerous condition of public property. Everyone hearing my voice today knows this reason to be false. One must wonder what East Bay MUD management is doing instead of fixing the dangerous condition. Why has East Bay MUD failed to honor the promise made to me last April, almost a year ago, by Carlton Chan, he being General Manager Chan's own brother, to promptly restore the hydrant to its required functionality? The hydrant has been out of service now for nearly 2 years, and dozens of additional East Bay MUD fire hydrants are likewise out of service, maybe the one near your home, with each such outage creating an additional dangerous condition of public property, of which East Bay MUD is aware. East Bay MUD has been cited by the Moraga Orinda Fire Department with 2 counts of violating the California Fire Code. I know each member of the board knows this, as I sent each of them a copy, and each day constitutes an additional violation. Is East Bay MUD waiting for another red flag day or for wildfire to spread through Sleepy Hollow? Remember, if homes or lives are lost because fire hydrant H14100 is out of service, it is East Bay MUD, and by extension, the ratepayers who will pay. With a few more Public Records Act requests made here and there, we shall find out more, and we shall share that information with you and with the media. The media is investigating, and we are just getting started. Posse members, we also need a few more details about executive compensation and bonuses. So keep those tips coming to East Bay MUD at NICKLAWRENCE.com. Tune in again, everyone, March 8th, when we return for episode 14 of A Dangerous Condition of Public Property. Okay, we're on the official record and out of time. Back to you, Risha.
Thank you. Next, we have Casey Evans. Casey, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Lawrence, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You are my favorite producer. And I, again, apologize about the condition that's happening in your neighborhood. I myself have tried to look into it and been shut down. So I do want to let you know that staff here is concerned, and we do hear you, although it may be the bottom and we're not able to install the changes that are needed. I just wanted to come and say thank you to Ms. Halsey. I thank you to all of us who are left behind, who knows what it is to be here and to know that what you say is true. I do appreciate you, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate Yvette, and I just, from those of us who are left here underneath the heavy rock of retaliation, I just want you to know we appreciate you. That is all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other hands for public comment at the moment. Okay, 2 hands just went up. Yvette Rivera, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will
I'm
start
sorry.
now.
Risha, I need a second. I'm sorry. My Bluetooth is going out. I've got to change my mic. Can you go to the next person?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sean Barrow, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Okay, thank you, Risha. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Fellow EBMUD employees, board, and a general manager. I probably put myself in this position of speaking at the board meetings more in the last 3 months than I have ever done in my 27 years at the district. And I think it's important that that we take a look at some of the things that some of the other people have said. And I'm doing my best to maintain my emotions because the travesties that I see happening in my division are a bit overwhelming. Now, we have a situation here where you can look back at the history of our division. And Mike Wallace, in his infinite wisdom, he looked within in order to provide direction to the division that I currently work for. You know, Wallace hired Leonard Prestia. In that process, he, in his wisdom, determined that there may be some lacking. So he made the Pathways program. And out of that, you got Leanne Gustafson. And after Leanne Gustafson, you have Antonio Martinez. And you have other people who have went through that process, yet when their opportunities came, they were overlooked. Now, I did a little lookup of some things, and you know, some of the things that are happening right now with our current shoot, the word eludes me, but you know, work out of class is important to us, right? And one of your candidates who failed to get the job has 579 hours of work out of class as the manager of my division, right? And that's before we get to the point to where it's day per day. So in the past, you had to work 5 days straight to account for some work out of class time. And then, you know, through negotiations, it was 3 days straight, and now it's hour per hour. But to amass 579 hours of work out of class as a division manager says a lot about one of the candidates. Now, one of the things that was brought to my attention was that there's a learning curve when it comes to managing this division that I work for. And I say to you, that is false. I say to you that when I look down the chain and I'm seeing the staff that work under me, I can tell you which one of my plumbers are capable of becoming foremen. I can tell you which one of my foremen are capable of becoming assistants. Just like I'm certain that I know those assistants who can fill my position. And it should be no different when it comes to the division manager. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Yvette? You should be able to unmute your mic.
Thank you. I appreciate.
Your 3
Thank you.
minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. I want to say to Casey Evans, I want to thank you for your strength and your courage for speaking at these board meetings. I appreciate you, and I'm riveted every time you speak, so thank you. Nick Lawrence, you continue to bring up matters of public concern, and I want you to know, along with Casey Evans, that many of us at the district stand with you. because you are bringing up a matter of public concern. To Julia Halsney, I am going to need some time to digest everything she said. This is a woman in high-level management that retired not that long ago. And she could have sat home comfortably, taking in her big fat retirement check and said nothing. And I'm going to address her comments, or I'm going to reference her comments at later board meetings. I don't know if anybody on the board is listening. I don't know if anyone on the board cares, but John Coleman, you have 32 years at the district. Frank Mellon, 28. And I'm not going to continue reading everybody's length of service at East Bay MUD, but it doesn't appear that you care. It doesn't appear that any of these lawsuits fall on you enough so that you can do something to change the culture at East Bay MUD. I'm going to go ahead and read one document that I spoke about this morning. It's a PACER monitor document that announces Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce's hearing that's going to happen next Friday. It's the lawsuit, the federal lawsuit against East Bay MUD, Craig Spencer, and Laura Costa. The hearing is a conference management, a case management conference that's set for next Friday at 2 p.m. It's available to the public. It's going to be a Zoom meeting. I'm going to read what it says because it's important that no one videotape the proceedings. So let me go ahead and read. And just to let you know, all you got to do is type in the search bar, Pierce versus East Bay MUD Federal Court, and you will be able to find the link for that Zoom conference. The conference document basically says persons granted access to court proceedings held by telephone or video conference are reminded that photographing, recording, and rebroadcasting of court proceedings, including screenshots or other visual copying of a hearing, is absolutely prohibited. If anybody needs more information, you can email me at eastbaymudgal@gmail.com. That's eastbaymudgal@gmail.com. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
All right, any other speakers?
Are there any other speakers for public comment? There are no other speakers, President Lenny.
The comment period then for non-agenda items is now closed. We're on to a consent calendar. Items 1 through 9. Are there any items to be pulled from consent calendar for discussion? All right, do I have a motion?
Sean, Doug, I'll move 1 through 9.
Second.
All right, motion
Are
by
there any speakers?
Director Coleman, seconded by Director McIntosh. Any further discussion? All right, Secretary, will you please call roll?
There are no speakers for public comment on the consent calendar. Okay. Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. Thank you. Those items have passed unanimously. On to determination discussion. General Manager Chan, will you please introduce each item?
Thank you, President Liddy. So first up are a number of actions related to the replacement of Fontaine pumping plant in Oakland. This project was discussed with the Planning Committee last year. We have a brief presentation by Daniel Jones, Associate Civil Engineer, prior to bringing the recommended actions to the board.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Clifford. My name is Dan Jones, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today for approval and adoption of the Fontaine Pumping Plant Replacement Project and Mitigated Negative Declaration, which I'll refer to going forward as an MND. The project was presented to the Planning Committee on October 12, 2021, prior to the release of the draft MND where 2 comments from board members were provided. The first comment was related to site security features that prevent our facility from becoming an attractive nuisance in the neighborhood, similar to concerns at the 39th Avenue pumping plant project. And the second comment was related to monitoring and addressing potential traffic impacts during construction. Staff confirmed that these concerns have already been incorporated into the project. The proposed site security features include security fencing surrounding the entire site and motion sensor lighting, which prevents our facility from becoming an attractive nuisance. Also, the standard practices and procedures incorporated into the project require the contractor to develop a traffic control plan addressing traffic impacts, and coordination with the city of Oakland for encroachment permit compliance is required. These are consistent with what we are doing at the Orinda Water Treatment Plant Improvements Project. This project includes replacing the existing Fontaine pumping plant at a new district-owned site. And shown here is a rendering of the architecture and landscaping at the new site. Next slide, please. The agenda for today's presentation will start with an overview of the project needs, including the details of the existing pumping plant, the new pumping plant. Then we'll review the M&D analysis results, including the mitigation measures, the outreach conducted to gather input from the public and various agencies. We'll talk about the schedule and next steps and the recommended action. Next slide, please. So in terms of the project need, shown here is the existing Fontaine pumping plant site in aerial view, and the yellow rectangle in the center of the image is the pumping plant site. The site is located in a deep-seated historical landslide zone, shown here in the yellow hatched area, and is within the extents of the Hayward earthquake fault, which is shown here as red dashed lines. The pumping plant was built in 1963, and many components are nearing or have reached the end of their useful life and need replacement. Therefore, we are replacing the aging Fontaine pumping plant with a new Fontaine pumping plant at a district-owned site away from the landslides in the Hayward Fault, which increases the reliability of the pumping plant and EBMUD's overall system. Next slide, please. It's another shot of the existing Fontaine pumping plant, shown here at street view from Ney Avenue. And the existing pumping plant is located at 8445 Ney Avenue in Oakland. The pump station can move up to 20 million gallons per day and supplies drinking water to parts of the cities of Oakland, Castro Valley, Hayward, and San Leandro. Note that the pumping plant is partially buried, and you can really only make out the roof line of the pumping plant structure. Next slide, please. The existing condition of the new Fontaine pumping plant site is shown here in aerial view and is located at the corner of 96th Avenue and MacArthur Boulevard in Oakland. Next slide, please. We jumped forward a few too many. One more back. There we go. Thanks. So this is the same view, but it's a drawing showing the new pumping plant's conceptual site plan at the corner of 96th Avenue and MacArthur Boulevard. And I'll highlight some of the key components of the scope of the project. So there'll be a new pumping plant building, which will house the pumps, motors, and a new rate control valve. There will be outdoor electrical equipment, including a transformer and switchgear, which will provide power to the pumping plant. New security fencing with barbed wire will surround the entire perimeter of the site, and motion sensor lighting will be installed to ensure the site is secure. Primary access is off of 96th Avenue. Secondary access gates are provided for PG&E to access their electrical equipment, and a large sliding gate off of MacArthur Boulevard for large equipment deliveries in the infrequent event that we need to deliver large equipment to the site. There are paved areas for parking and placement of a generator or a pump in an emergency, while minimizing the paved areas for storm water runoff. Landscaping has been selected that is drought tolerant and low density, requiring minimum maintenance. Next slide, please. This figure shows the alignment of the new pipelines constructed to connect the new pumping plant to the system. Approximately 1,100 feet of 30-inch suction pipeline will be installed along 96th Avenue, and approximately 3,650 feet of 30-inch discharge pipeline will be installed along MacArthur Boulevard and 99th Avenue. Next slide, please. I think we skipped 2 slides again. Go back 1, please. Thank you. Okay, this image shows an aerial of the aerial view of the existing pumping plant site with the property line shown in the green dash lines. The existing building footprint is shown in the red dash lines, and a potential new retaining wall is shown in the yellow line. So upon completion of, upon completion of construction and successful testing of the new pumping plant and pipelines, the existing pumping plant will be demolished and a new retaining wall may be constructed. Portions of the existing building may be utilized for soil retention. You remember that the pumping plant was partially buried, so a portion of that of the pumping plant building may be utilized for soil retention if deemed possible during geotechnical investigations completed prior to design completion. The district will keep ownership of the site to provide access to operate and maintain a 48-inch transmission pipeline that traverses the site. Next slide, please. This image shows the existing pumping plant's suction and discharge pipeline alignments, connecting the existing pumping plant to the system. In addition to demolishing the existing pumping plant, approximately 2,100 feet of the existing 30-inch suction and discharge pipelines will be abandoned in place by excavating to the pipelines in existing paved roads at the 3 locations shown here in red squares. The pipelines will be cut and filled with cellular concrete. They will be capped, and then the pavement will be backfilled and restored. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. So looking at the draft M&D analysis results, the results of the draft M&D are summarized in the key environmental areas shown in this table. A number of standard construction specifications, district procedures, design guidelines, and engineering standard practices have been incorporated into the project to reduce impacts to less than significant levels. These standard practices and procedures are designed to address typical characteristics of district construction projects and reflect generally applicable district standard operating procedures. However, 2 areas, aesthetics and transportation, required mitigation measures in order to reduce the impacts to less than significant, which I will discuss in the next slides. So next slide, please. This image shows an example of construction during nighttime hours requiring stationary lighting. And mitigation measure aesthetics 1 requires the district's contractor to utilize lighting shields and directional lighting during any nighttime scheduled work in order to ensure light sources from stationary lighting are not impacting nearby residential areas or streets. Next slide, please. Transportation, mitigation measure transportation 1 requires the district's contractor to provide temporary pedestrian diversions around construction areas and or obstructions while maintaining the pedestrian's path of travel along MacArthur Boulevard. This figure illustrates how a pedestrian would be diverted around an obstruction. Next slide, please. And this figure shows bus routes that could be affected by the construction activities associated with both project sites. The new project site is shown towards the bottom of the picture as an orange rectangle, and the existing pumping plant site is towards the top of the image and is shown as a orange hatch area. Both the existing and new pumping plant sites are shown on the figure. Mitigation measure transportation 2 requires that the district coordinate with AC Transit and Oakland Department of Transportation to obtain approval for temporary bus stop relocations and or closures along Golf Links Road, which may be impacted during the existing pipeline abandonments, and MacArthur Boulevard, which may be impacted during new pumping plant and or new pipeline construction. Next slide, please. So for the draft MND outreach, staff sent approximately 1,700 mailers to nearby residents and businesses and posted notices in the East Bay Times, on the district's website, at the district's administrative office, and filed a notice with the Alameda County Clerk. A public meeting was held during the public comment period on October 27, 2021. No written or verbal comments were received during the public meeting or following the end of the public comment period. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, no comments were received. Therefore, the draft MND becomes the final MND without issuing revisions. So on February 10th, 2022, a notice of availability of the final MND with a link to the final MND document was mailed to responsible and trustee agencies, posted on the district's website, and posted to the district's administrative office. After the board adopts the final MND and approves the project, design will begin and is currently estimated to begin in 2026 and take approximately 18 to 24 months to complete. The project is anticipated to begin construction in 2028 and is estimated to take 2 years to complete. Next slide, please. Recommended actions. So staff recommends the board take the following actions. Adopt the final MND for the project. Make findings in accordance with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. Adopt the MMRP, the Mitigation, Monitoring, and Reporting Plan. Adopt the Practices and Procedures Monitoring and Reporting Plan. And finally, approve the project. Next slide. So thank you all again for the opportunity to present the project's final MND. And now I'll open it up to any questions you may have.
I see Director Young has her hand raised.
Yeah, just a couple questions on the process. For the public meeting, how many individuals participated? Did any individuals participate?
We did. We had low turnout, but I believe there was 2 individuals that participated in the virtual meeting.
Okay, and neither had any comments?
No comments. There was a clarifying question that was asked.
Okay.
No comments.
And then the other question just relates to the fact that we're filing this 5 years in advance of actually doing the project. So I'm assuming that we will do active community outreach and make changes as needed to various things when that happens. I mean, one thing that I think about, for instance, might be that MacArthur, that part of MacArthur has more, starts having more bicycle traffic or other things that you'd have to take part of, care for in a traffic mitigation plan or other things like that. I just think once we're actually at project, that that's important, will be important to do.
Yes, and further public meetings are being planned for closer to the design.
Okay, thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
I see Director Coleman has a question.
Thank you, Clifford. A good presentation. I guess I'm really surprised, maybe where Marguerite is coming from, like there was not a whole lot of public comment. It's in a residential area, and we're talking about where the current facility is, surrounded by homes, to maybe store dirt. And I'm just surprised. I think we should expect, as this process goes on, there's going to be people who are saying, wait a second, I didn't know about it. And the other thing is, I know we want to keep a 48-inch transition pipeline through there, but what is the value of that land? I mean, does all the land need to be dedicated to that versus selling it, quite frankly, in a residential community so somebody could put a home up, and versus using it as a, I don't know, use the term a pit stop when it's not necessarily needed. But I don't represent that area. I'm just surprised that nobody has raised some of these issues when you're surrounded by homes on three sides.
Okay. I would just clarify that the comment we did receive at the public meeting was from a neighbor at the existing site.
Okay.
Or a question, I should say, not comment. They were curious about the timing because they had some landscaping that they wanted to decide when they were going to work on it. But they were active at the existing site more so than the new site.
Well, I mean, the new site, it's bound on two sides by a street, and the design looks like it would fit into the neighborhood. I'm just saying the current site, there's a value to the land more than I would think storing dirt if we're able to maintain it, keep the transition pipeline of, if we need to keep it there, keeping it there and potentially selling it. I don't know. I just think there'd be an economic value to the district.
You will, again, Daniel, I don't know if you know any more about the long-term use of that piece of property.
What I do know is that the 48-inch transmission main alignment is going to be looked at during its next replacement cycle. So that's about as much as I know right now.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions in the boardroom.
All right. Can we vote on all these at once, all A through E, with one motion?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Do I have such a motion?
Frank, I'll move the items A through,
E, I think.
second.
gotta
I
find
have
it
a-
back here again.
I have a motion by Director Mellon to approve items 10A through 10E, seconded by Director. Okay, thank you. Second. Yeah. Any further discussion? All right, have a roll call vote, please.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson, Director Patterson, Director Patterson.
The screen looks frozen.
Yep. Okay. Do you want to call him? Okay. And Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on for now.
Call him.
Thank you, Daniel. So at the January 25th board meeting, we held a workshop to discuss our DEI strategic plan. At the workshop, the board provided comments on the plan, and we have since updated the plan to incorporate your feedback. Before you, for your consideration, is the adoption of the strategic plan. Derry Moten has a brief presentation to review the updates and next steps related to implementation.
We will very briefly be providing you an overview of some of the modifications and next steps that we have for the plan. To begin, I want to thank all of the employees who have been part of this process. We've had a large number of employees through both our affinity groups, our diversity committee, our equity core teams, and our district advocates who've all been part of this in terms of the development of the planning. And actually, I'll thank for all of you for your support in the process as we're going forward here. So we're going to begin with the next slide. And what we've done is we have, there we go. We've taken the language that we received from the board workshop with you all on January 24th, and we've integrated those changes into the plan where appropriate. Otherwise, we've integrated them into our working plan as we're moving forward here. So we specifically have expanded our DEI term section to include more clarity around several things that we discussed in terms of how we are defining environmental justice, also how we are defining other terms. We've refined our action plan to include some of the items that were brought up specifically, and we've expanded the section on our program evaluation and our dashboard metrics. The dashboard is going to be really key to how we're continuing to do measures as we're going forward to measure the effectiveness of the plan and how we make progress in the long term. Then the staff and the equity core team projects have been updated to include board feedback and points of emphasis as were recorded by the board at the workshop. Next slide. So as we mentioned, the kind of key foundations for the strategic approach here is keeping our levels of employee engagement and involvement high, continue to use equity toolkits, and then our commitment to continuous improvement. Those items are priorities that we're going to continue to focus on as we're going forward here, which are reflected in a couple different things. Next slide. Number one, within our governance structure, as you'll note, we have a series of things that are work teams that are involving employees that we will continue to do in the implementation process. And really key in the implementation process here will be the work of our diversity committee on outreach work, our values advocates on working on organizational culture, and our contract equity advisory committee, both internally and externally, in providing us additional guidance on needs of the local communities that we're serving in terms of contracts and how we continue to make sure that we're giving adequate training to potential vendors coming into the door. Next slide. So our plan implementation is focused in 3 specific areas in terms of who's involved. Number one, we have a series of staff projects, including the DEI dashboard, our enhancements to our equal employment opportunity program, and how we do investigations and how we do mitigation after investigations, which includes our alternative dispute resolution processes. Then we have our equity core team projects. The 5 equity core team projects are working on hiring and recruitment, promotion and retention, contracts and procurement, and capital improvements. Those projects are currently moving forward, and we'll continue to get feedback from them and continue to implement their recommendations as we're going forward. And then advisory and steering committees, we have kind of our contract equity group that we'll be looking at both internally and externally, and then working deeper at environmental justice and how we coordinate those efforts across multiple disciplines within the district. Next slide. We're beginning internally, but eventually external would become part of the conversation. So the staff projects, we have the DEI dashboard. Yes.
Ask the question. Sort of. We often hear in public comment employees like 4 today or 3 today and 1 past. Are we reaching out to those people to make sure that they're being included in the dialogue? I mean, we may or may not always agree with what they have to say, but they're bringing up legitimate issues rather than just saying, forget it, we're just going to go forward. Do we reach out to those who have often speak, not every week, but often, or every meeting, to find out part of where they're coming from?
Yes, actually, kind of twofold here. One of the reasons we wanted to make sure that if we go back to the slide on the governance structure, one of the reasons we wanted to try to make sure that we are including all these individuals is to create as many outlets as possible for dialogue. Naturally, we're not going to catch every single person, but we do try to do follow-ups when we hear significant things, and we want to make sure that we're responding to.
I realize that. I mean, and you can't, not any one group or entity can be everything to everybody. I understand that. But at the same time, there seems to be, at least it appears to me, that when some individuals speak at our board meetings and public comment, they have a group of people around them that happen to agree. Some are current employees, some are former employees, and I just don't want to have their views discounted and somehow listened to. If they can be incorporated in a positive way, great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And again, I actually, as we were listening, I'm taking notes today, and we try to take notes every meeting and try to see what we can do to make sure we're doing outreach to those individuals and tapping into the sentiment, because the fact of the matter is the sentiment of employees is real. And whether we're doing things intentionally or we have blind spots organizationally, those are things for us to continue to deal with. And one of the things we have to just continue to do is work on improvement of those items.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, the staff projects, the DEI dashboard has the efforts on that have been launched. We have a kind of a joint project with Human Resource Information Systems team, our finance group, and they're working together to create metrics specifically that we're looking at. We're looking at metrics in a couple of different areas around hiring, retention. Examples of things that will be included in the dashboard is looking at our candidate diversity for recruitments. Because as we're doing outreach and we're trying to figure out ways to improve our outreach, we have to be able to have hard data that shows where we're successful and where we're not. And we can continue to make different efforts, but unless we can measure it, we can't really look at how effective we're being. The second thing is looking at voluntary and involuntary resignations. What do those rates look like and how are we doing? Because even if we are meeting some of our objectives in terms of hiring, then is that retention there in terms of employees and how they're being retained overall? The next is around our workforce demographics, looking at average lengths of service by gender, race, and age, salary distribution, and promotion rates, with those same emphasis points to make sure that we're actually measuring our DEI efforts on the long term. Next slide. So we have our staff projects, which are also working on hiring manager training. We talked about this last time, and again, looking at how we train hiring managers around diversity outreach, looking at avoiding bias in the interview process, and looking for equity-minded candidates, why do we integrate into our both interview questions and also some of our overall scripting of our announcements that we're looking specifically for employees who have a focus on equity. And then our alternative dispute resolution, we're looking at how we can integrate research and restorative practices. So our DEI team is actually looking into those items now. We actually have a couple of pilots that we're going to be doing in terms of working with groups after there's been an investigation, how to work with the group to get the group itself back up to productivity in those areas. Next. So our equity core team, again, is working on their pilot projects. The hiring recruitment pilot project, they're working on evaluation of testing practices and options, expanding access to district career information, which is specific things that we heard from the board that are written into the plan. Also the promotion and retention equity pilot project, looking at internal promotions, career ladders and lattices, and exit interviews are all items that are on these pilot project teams to work specifically on. Next. Our contract equity advisory committee, developing processes for the prime and sub prime matching contractor matching projects, and then also environmental justice steering committee, which is not a formal committee yet, but we've had an initial meeting with several of our SMT members to talk about how we define our approach to environmental justice practices into both the planning processes and also how do we do some retrospective evaluation of impacts as a district standard. Next slide. And so our next steps here are to really have the board here today consider the adoption of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Strategic Plan. We want to continue plan implementation. As mentioned, there are roughly 24 items that are currently underway. We want to also work toward identifying necessary resources. We are resourced for the things that we're starting for this fiscal year. We'll be looking at mid-cycle to look at are there any enhancements that need to be required, need to be modified in terms of our budget for the next year. And we're going to provide regular updates to Legislative Human Resources Committee and to the board as we go through. So with that, I'd like to open up for any questions that the board has.
Director Katz?
Board comments, questions?
Yes, thank you for the presentation and for including board feedback and so much work and the contributions of our staff and everything that's gone into this report. I very much appreciate it. One quick question about how will you implement some of these initiatives? Just for example, I'm looking at the EJ Advisory Committee and the subcontractor prime and sub matching project, two excellent projects that deserve some care in implementation. I'm interested in how we will include community feedback. Will we focus on a stakeholder interview approach, or does it make sense to have a inclusion of outside stakeholders side by side in a as part of the committee? Which approach are you inclining to take at this time?
Thank you for that question. We're going to be utilizing, one of the things that we received in the training from the Winters Group was training specifically on the usage of equity toolkits, and you've heard us probably reference those several times. And part of the equity toolkit process is to utilize a structured community engagement process, which does kind of look at what the specific issue is and then make the determination on what the best outreaches are, what level of engagement are we after, whether we're just going to inform the community or we're actually looking for community partnership and engagement. So to measure those project by project as kind of a standard process and practice that we use is what we're piloting right now in each of the 5 pilot projects. And so we will use that specifically. One of the items in terms of the existing group on capital improvements is looking at how they want to do community engagement, specifically around the Fontaine project, as you mentioned a little bit earlier in the previous presentation. And that's one of the dialogues that we're having about how to actually shape the community engagement for the next steps of the process as we're going forward. So in terms of looking at environmental justice, we'll be looking at modifying the practices that we're kind of absorbing from this process and looking at the forms of community engagement, and then looking specifically as we go project to project, what is the most appropriate way to engage based on the projects.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I appreciate the depth of that answer. And while I didn't hear a specific intention for those 2 examples I gave, I think you explained the method that you'll be applying. My main concern is making sure that we're not just doing a one touch and then taking that information and going off internally without going back to the community or the stakeholders. And I definitely heard that we will be making sure that we're being inclusive with outside stakeholders that may have very important knowledge in what could succeed or what may not be as successful. Thanks for that attention. And I'd like to still hear about that, the mode of engagement in any of the written reports, at least while these things are still underway, just so that board members reviewing the reports or in the presentations can keep track of the quality of community engagement. And I appreciate that sometimes more is appropriate and less is appropriate. So thanks for that explanation.
Thank you. And we have Director McIntosh and then Director Young.
I am pleased to lend my support on this strategic plan in spite of a recent event. But I hope it's with the understanding that this entire strategic plan cannot rest on dairy's back. Even though I have the ultimate confidence in dairy, this has to be a full organizational support plan. And the board can vote it in, but because we're not responsible for day-to-day running of the district, it falls on our general manager to make sure that this is working appropriately. And it requires, and I believe Clifford is devoted to this, I really do, but it requires Clifford's full attention through every aspect of this, because we all must commit ourselves to the tenets of this strategic plan. Not just the board, not even just the general manager or dairy. There's a trickle-down effect, and I hope we're all committed to this. And we're going to have to leave it up to you, Clifford, to make certain that what we are supporting, what we are voting on, is actually becoming a reality, and it's not falling through the cracks. So with that, I lend my full support to this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the progress as we go forward. So Derry, thank you and all of your group for your work. Clifford, thank you for your full support of this, and thank you to my board colleagues for for caring about this issue so much, and making certain that it's going to happen at East Bay Mud. So thank everyone concerned, and just please, let's make this happen and not pie in the sky.
Thank you, Director McIntosh. We do all understand how.
Comments that way. I'll take that as a motion then.
That was a motion.
We do have another question from Director Young, though.
I will use my question to add a second to the motion and echo Lisa's comments that this has been a several year project in the making, reflecting decades of need to happen, and that it will be painful. We'll be able to tell if it's working, if it's painful. When employees who are having issues feel like they can speak up and that they can get those issues addressed, because it's not like the plan makes things go away. It surfaces the problems and the issues that we need to address. And so it ain't gonna be nice all the time. In fact, if it is, we'll know that it is just lipstick and cosmetic and not real change. So I am, feel very confident, Derry, in you and in Clifford's commitment, to the plan, and want to say to, is it 2,100? How many employees?
About 2,000.
About 2,000, employees today, is that this is on all of us, to do, and, very happy to support it. To the EJ issue, I mean, we are fortunate in the Bay Area to have a number of the country's, longest standing advocates and activists on environmental justice issues. And I would hope that as we look internally, that we are taking advantage of resources like the Asia Pacific Environmental Network and the West County Toxics Coalition, and I could go on, to the folks that have been, addressing environmental justice and environmental racism head on in their communities. It may not have touched us, but, Miss Margaret at the West Oakland Indicators Project, and, there are, some very, very, very astute, talented, knowledgeable people with lived experience in our area who we can talk to understand what we need to do, rather than counting on necessarily just on our smart brains to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, happy to help make connections if that's helpful as well.
Thanks.
So, that's all for me.
Director Katz, is that your hand from your previous comment?
That was an older hand, but I will just say that Director Young I took some of the sentiments that I was expressing and said it much better, so thank you.
It's because I'm in person.
Bill, I see your hand up.
Yes, I don't know what sometimes I'm clicking this thing and I'm clicking me on and off, and I'm not sure when I'm on and off anymore. I just wanted to say historically, I come from the civil rights corner. It used to be the big arena, and now it's part of the action. And just to let you know, a key thing to remember is this. Back in the late 50s, and then there was in 60s, there were things going on that we helped get the first African-American employees into East Bay Mud. By the time I came on the board, many of them that went in at that time, and most of them working in the 444 category at the top, they were retiring. I had a strong support from the Retiree Association as a result of that. Now, they brought brothers and other family members into EBMUD. Many of them are dead now. Some died recently. I want to just say, historically, a position was attained. Lisa and I had the members of 444 who happened to be in a different racial category. And they talked about who's in the hole and who's working in that capacity. And they were very concerned. And we've seen diversity come in, and we've seen changes. It is difficult somehow to get the ethnic person's identification because some of them don't want to be. And you have a difficult role to hold. I say that because in the beginning, as I came on the board, people relied on me and others on the board as they came to voice their concerns. Now they have an open court. They have direct contact and ability to make their case known. It's what you do about it that's key. You see, we were not afraid to step out. And many times we stepped out, we got beat up, some killed, standing up for each other. So we really pioneered things. It's an easier road now. We're more together. The ethnicities have come together, the socials have come together, all have come together moving forward. So make sure you're not afraid to step out because you are the key to all of this now in your position. And I know Clifford supports you, but I want to be sure and make that known because at the stroke of what you do, it can lead a lot of people to have faith in the system and what's going on, and that there will be not only matters heard, but there'll be something done about them. And so I offer that to you, and we're giving you that platform. That's what the position is for. So I will hope you will not be afraid. It's something I taught Bill Russell, some of the young men who were under me as kids. Do not be afraid. That was a phrase that I implanted in them. So don't be afraid. And if you need somebody to talk to, you might need somebody to talk to. Don't hesitate. I'll make myself available. I just wanted the right thing to be done and to be able to witness it before I'm out of here. So that's my statement for today. Carry on.
Thank you, Director
Thanks,
Pettis.
Bill. Other comments, questions by board members? All right, we have a motion by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Young. You ready for a vote? Let's have a roll call vote.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Absolutely.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Linney.
Yes, carries unanimously.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for
Your
your work,
support
Gary.
means a lot here.
Thank you for your work.
Next, we have the Local 21 MOU. We have 3 actions related to the 2021 to 2025 year MOU and other special agreements between the district and Local 21. Just to let you know, the Local 21 members did ratify their MOU on February 8th. I don't have a particular presentation, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions or comments?
I don't see any in the boardroom.
All right.
Thank everyone for their hard work on this. It's been tough for everyone.
Absolutely, greatly appreciate that this has been moving forward. This is moving forward, and we have an opportunity to vote on this.
I'll move the recommendation to adopt the contract.
All right, do I have a second?
Second?
All right, motion by Director Young, seconded by Director Patterson. Let's have a roll call vote.
And that's for items 12A through 12C. Director
That's right.
Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Abstain for the reasons I cited specifically previously on the Local 39 contract.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. Okay, noted 6 votes, 1 abstention. Carries.
Thank you very much for that. And moving on to the General Manager's report, I have 2 reports. The first is our COVID update. As you're aware, the COVID numbers are continuing to improve at the district and certainly around the state. Our plan is to begin on February 28th, the first transition step to bring employees back to the office. Also, we do have a plan to have our first in-person board meeting on March 8th with the entire board. This meeting will not be open to the public. However, if conditions continue to improve, the March 22nd board meeting will be open to the public. With that, I'll pass off to Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, to provide the update.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. Good afternoon, President Linney. Good afternoon, members of the board. So we'll look at slide 2 here first, which is showing the positive cases in our local counties on top. And the lower graphic shows the positive cases that the district has recorded since the beginning of the pandemic. And so, of course, the correlation is very clear between the two. We did see a rapid rise and, thankfully, a rapid decline in the Omicron surge, which we more or less have gotten through at this point. The value in looking at the county's data, it's not that valuable for knowing what's going to happen next, although sometimes that data does lead our own data by a week or so. But the real value of looking at the county data is that with such a large sample pool of 1.8 million people in the county, it tells us more clearly where we are right now. So when we see some variation, we have most of the time, luckily, we have a very low positivity rate at the district. So looking at the countywide trend is very useful to tell us where we may be headed or where we may be heading next, looking at the county data. And also notice that February is much, much lower so far through February 22nd relative to the month of January. So looking at the next slide, we're up to 439 positives for employees so far, 33 contractors. It's significantly slower. In the second week of January, as the board knows, we were generating 10, 11, and I think on one day, 12 positives per day. The last week, the last 6 days, we've had 3 or 4 for the entire week. And so that is a significant drop, and by all accounts, we're out of the surge. We had, when all is said and done, 250 or so over that 4 or 5 week period. I do want to credit everybody, really, all employees for getting through that. It was a very intense period, and I think everybody stayed calm, which helped, and I mean everybody. So that was really what got us through that. That was an incredible period of time. We are, of course, monitoring all of the indicators, and a good leading indicator to keep an eye on is the COVID concentration in wastewater. So there's a nice way of reviewing that. 8 or 9 wastewater plants around the Bay Area. They're all showing COVID concentrations that are essentially pre-Omicron level. So we've pretty much returned to normal in terms of the concentration in wastewater. That's great to see. and all the other metrics, which are not so much leading as the wastewater, the positivity rate, the positive cases, et cetera, up and down the state. We're by and large all the way through it, which is probably why the governor went through with his announcements last week.
Dave, we have a question.
Are we partnering with any particular institution on the wastewater reading?
Yeah, Eileen is partnering with UC Berkeley, I believe. Is that right, Clifford?
Berkeley, Stanford are the two agencies along with the Public Health Department.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so continuing on, so as has been reported throughout, relatively low impact on essential operations. About 14 people, a dozen or so, are not at work or are unable to telecommute right now. That is a much lower number. You may recall in the middle of January, we were looking at like 100. So an order of magnitude lower, and it's decreasing every day, which is fantastic. Nobody is presently in the hospital with COVID complications, employees, or COVID complications. About 2 weeks ago, we did have somebody admitted for about 2 days. That employee is at home now resting and recovering, but right now no one is in the hospital that we know of. Just for next steps, so I think as Clifford summarized, we're expecting to invite employees back for a phased return to work. So not everybody's coming back on the 28th, but employees will begin to come back 1 to 2 days a week beginning next Monday. We know that some employees have some anxiety about coming back, and we've heard them and listened to them. We want to make it clear what the expectations are, what the work environment looks like. We're working to keep occupancy low. We're staggering the work groups that come back into this large building here so that we don't have everybody coming back at once. We smooth it out through the week. We're all going to be wearing face coverings for the foreseeable future, as the board knows. That is not a requirement under health code right now or OSHA, but employers and even public employers like the district can impose face coverings if they deem warranted. And so we are taking that conservative measure and applying the face coverings for the foreseeable future indoors. The self-checks at the front door will always apply, so all employees need to perform that self-check when they come to work. And we're otherwise just making sure that occupancy stays low and that we keep worker-to-worker transmission exceedingly low. We have had, even during the Omicron surge, we had, I believe, 1 worker-to-worker transmission in the office. So it is exceedingly rare, even in the depth of the Omicron surge, which was an extremely transmissible form of the disease. The board is conducting its own phase return, as you know. Several of the board members are here today. Clifford mentioned we may have all 7 here on March 8th. And if the board does not adopt another resolution to allow virtual meetings, the public will be included on March 22nd. Available leave is complicated. The state, through SB 114, put out another up to 80 hours for employees to use for COVID-related reasons. In some ways, that supplements other leave that district employees have access to. It's not simple, and Winnie and our HR people are doing a great job explaining to people how to use it, what to use first, what it's used for. It's a complicated process, but just as they have done throughout the pandemic, as this wide variety of leave has been available for the last 2 years, they've done a great job telling employees what it all means. We still have testing at the district for our own employees. I think we may be down to 5 testing sites on 5 days a week. That's down from 1 testing site. As our infection rate goes down, we no longer need to provide that return to work testing that's so valuable because so few employees are infected right now. So that will drop off our testing sites, a lot of the business in our testing sites, and at some point it'll revert back to the 3 sites on 3 days that is for more or less for our exempted employees. So we'll collapse that back down as the infection rate starts to decrease even more. And then finally, just boardroom protocol, just as a reminder, we'll all wear face coverings. I mentioned the self-checks. We will limit the number of people in the boardroom and members of the public, so we will have the training conference room center conference room available for any overflow for the public. They would be escorted into the boardroom if they want to make public comment in case there's any overcrowding, but I anticipate not a very full boardroom moving forward, even when we go back to having public board meetings. And then finally, just as we normally have during a public board meeting, the security staff will be here both before, during, and after to conduct their normal protocols and safety procedures to ensure the safety for all. And that's what I have for you.
Director Young?
Yeah, just I don't know if this is for Dave or for Derek or Clifford. Are we going to enable members of the public to come in to our meetings via Zoom when we are resumed in public session? Yes?
Yeah, they'll still be able to attend virtually.
They'll be able to attend virtually, but are you asking if they'll be able to be seen on screen or just?
Comment, I mean, as we've been doing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we gonna, when we have all 7 board members up here in 2 weeks, I guess, is there gonna be a plexiglass between us? No, yes?
No.
I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing this being debated elsewhere. That's why I was wondering.
There's no plans to do that, Director Coleman.
And the second question I have is, are we, I mean, God forbid, prepared if, you know, whatever, you know, Zeta variant, you know, comes along and, you know, messes us all up again? Are we like ready to?
Yeah, so I probably didn't mention this, but we're going to continuously, obviously, monitor everything, especially anything that's office-related contraction of the virus. So anything we can do to enhance safety, we will monitor everything. I think just even the state's state of mind is it's not over. We're just going to be better prepared for the next wave, unfortunately. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll just keep an eye on everything, and if we need to pivot or change protocols, we will, and just stay on the front foot.
Yeah, it's two aspects of the governor's plan, which is, you know, what we've been doing is the awareness and the readiness part of their plan. Before Director Mellon, I saw Director Katz had his hand up first.
Thanks. I do look forward to joining everyone at the boardroom at our next meeting. I do want to ask, in the abundance of caution, if a board member or a senior staff member is testing, or anybody presenting to us is testing positive or is exposed to somebody who is tested positive, what arrangements are we making? Is the plan to simply not have that individual participate, or will we be having hybrid participation options? Because obviously we do not want somebody testing positive to appear at the boardroom.
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, Director Katz, pursuant to the existing protocol, if you're symptomatic, if you're, are you referring to an asymptomatic person or a symptomatic person who may be exposed?
Yeah, I'm interested in how do we still have participation without compromising our safety. So any questions raised by my prompt?
So I would say if anyone is, obviously, if they're positive or symptomatic, they won't be here in person. That's the easy one. If you're fully vaccinated and exposed, you technically could come to work. That's a narrower set of scenarios that we may have to look at more closely, but certainly if it's a district speaker, we could have that person remote in.
Yeah, and the other thing, and that's part of the public health department's protocols, is if you are asymptomatic but exposed, you would have to wear a face covering. I mean, but we're requiring everyone to do it anyway, so that doesn't really matter so much for us.
Go ahead, John.
I'm going to raise the question. I sent an email, I think yesterday or this weekend, to Clifford and David. I was listening to the BCDC meeting last Thursday, and this issue came up about hybrid meetings. And what I was unaware of in a hybrid meeting, the law needs to be changed. I guess there's some effort to change it. But if you hold a meeting at your house, and you have 2 steps into your house, you have to build a ramp to accommodate the public, in addition to having a monitor for them to watch from, separate from your own monitor. So, I mean, we can maybe elaborate on that, because hopefully we're not going to go back into phase 4 or 5, whatever, of COVID. But in the event we do, people need to know legally what the law is today, what they can and cannot do, because I was unaware of the ramp issue until listening into the BCDC meeting last Thursday.
Yeah, and Derek did take a look into this. So Derek, would you like to reply?
So in the absence of a COVID resolution, we'd be under the old system where we would allow for remote access through a notice procedure, and board members could theoretically Zoom in from their homes. Those places would need to be ADA compliant.
Which is something I've never heard. I mean, I've Zoomed in before. Others have Zoomed in. I didn't know that until last week, that you have to be ADA compliant. And for some places, that's just not feasible for if you have more than 2 steps and to build a ramp. So I just think we need as board members to be aware if we're going to be Zooming in or we go into another round of COVID, what our limitations are and what we can and cannot do.
So we can provide some information at the next board meeting on what the requirements have technically always been, but maybe just so the board members are aware what's required if you do remote in.
Thank you.
If I may comment on that, the reason why I raised that question is, similar to the issues that John is raising. While I do fully agree with while it's safe to do so, being in person and having that be the normal interaction among our board members and at our board meetings, there is still some usefulness to having the resolution in place, because that way we're able to avoid some of the complications under the Brown Act, revealing our home addresses, that sort of thing. So if it's for a valid reason, that we are normalizing amongst ourselves, which is certainly testing positive for COVID-19, and I'm not sure exactly what other circumstances it would be. It does seem like the possibility of another wave might be another one of those circumstances, but I think there's still some usefulness to having the resolution as a standing order while there is still COVID circulating. Even if we are all 7 of us still intending to be in person, and we will do so, that's something I think that we should be considering, so that we don't have these participation challenges if we do end up in a situation where we need to avoid serious risk.
Director Young?
But I guess I thought what the resolution, and obviously we're going to need some clarification, but I thought if we have the resolution, we can't have members of the public in our meetings.
Wait.
Right? Even if we're all here. I mean, it's weird to be sitting in the room to the please leave empty signs and, 5 people here, right? I mean, part of being present for a public meeting is to be present with the public. So it feels, it's not a perfect situation, obviously, but.
So certainly the resolution does need to be supported by findings that meeting in person would pose a danger to the health and safety of the public and board members, et cetera. I will say that if circumstances change and there is a surge, that would allow us to essentially adopt a new resolution based on those changed circumstances.
No,
so you can have a gap, and we don't, as a matter of law, need to keep making the same findings every 30 days in order to keep it alive.
Yeah, I think Director Katz is referring to another, and potentially Director Coleman, to a different sort of circumstance of, anyway, we just need clarification, I think. It's too complicated for me to go further. At this point.
I think what I'm hearing is, there may be circumstances because COVID is still around us that a board member may not be able to participate, but the board members understand what the rules were before, but they may not be ready to have somebody at their places because we're still kind of in this hybrid COVID framework, so that, could there be a circumstance where we would have the resolution active so that, we can pivot very quickly, or a board member can pivot very quickly and call in from home. The challenge with the passing a resolution is, if you're going to allow the public into the building, it's hard to make the argument that you should pass a resolution because the public is now here and that danger doesn't exist. And right now, the numbers are down. So I think I hear what the board is saying. And right now, March 8th is still, the idea where the board members can be here, but the public will not participate. So I think we have the opportunity to see what's going on, if anything changes, if there's another variant out there. But as it stands right now, the numbers look good. There isn't any variant of concern out there. And so it seems like we can return back to a normal, more normal business.
I have 3 speakers for public comment, unless we have more board comment.
Director Mellon first.
Okay, 2 quick things. First of all, if we're having employees fill out the self sheet, where was our copy to grab today?
I think some of those logistics, Director Mellon, may be communicated through Risha, where there's a variety of ways you can perform that self-check, and Risha can probably tell you how to do it.
Well, I think if you left them in the
building.
I came in through the garage.
You come into the garage, you don't go to the first floor necessarily.
Well, even if you go through the first floor, there's nobody there.
Yeah,
right now.
so if I might suggest, leave in our offices so that we have it and then we turn it in. And then secondly, I'm still trying to wrestle with this thing about somebody either is in close contact with a person that has tested positive or they test positive themselves. We're back to normal March 3rd. How is it any different for an individual who's going to be out of town, like Upper Sandusky, Ohio, I'll just use that, and they want to call in for a board meeting, than an individual who is at home because they got to quarantine themselves for either 5 or 10 days? How is that different?
And you're talking about a member of the public or a board member?
A board member. I mean,
I can
every
answer
board
that.
member has
So
called
the
in from
scenario that I
somewhere.
had in mind was, under the Brown Act, if you're going to call in remotely, well, first there's the ADA requirement. It has to be into the secretary's office 72 hours in advance, and your private address, your home address, has to be revealed, or wherever you're going to be calling in from. So those are some limitations. And so if that positive diagnosis of a board member, which I hope does not happen, happens to be within that 72-hour window, then we have a challenge. Maybe our understanding would be that we would adopt the resolution as an emergency measure if we have general agreement on that principle. That if you're receiving a test with a positive diagnosis, or something that guidelines say is unsafe to do, that we would handle it that way. But that's why we wouldn't necessarily want to use the standard Brown Act procedures, because there's real limitations within that 72-hour window. There's no flexibility, and that's why the legislature passed this law.
I'm not talking about the 72-hour window here, Andy. I'm talking about, I know I'm either subject to the 5-day or the 10-day quarantine, and it's outside of the 72-hour window, so there's plenty of time to notice. But how is that different from somebody who's calling in from Upper Sandusky, Ohio?
It's not. The one difference, Frank, is if you're going to be calling in from wherever, let's say your home in Castro Valley, you have to give notice to Risha for when the agenda is posted, which you may not have. You may have come into contact with somebody afterwards, which creates a problem.
Right. All right.
And so
I'm still confused, but I'll leave it go.
One discussion we had when the whole pandemic started was, how do we address if someone is ill at home but not too ill to participate in a board meeting? And how do we address the public participation if somebody's at home or offsite? And so I think we need to have a conversation and then come back with information about the questions you asked about the Brown Act and what the board can do if you're either at home and you're ill but not too ill to participate in the board meeting, and how we address public comment. And also
we even had members of our executive team who have done that over the course of the COVID, where they were ill but not too ill to participate in their work assignment for a board meeting.
Well, our consultants at the retirement board last month both were COVID positive, I believe.
So, all right. I've stirred up the pot enough.
We heard a lot of questions. We'll bring it back on March 8th.
Yes. And I have 3. Do we have any other board comments before we go to public comment? Okay. I have 3 hands for public comment. Max Pfeffer. Max, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Great, thank you, Risha. Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Max Seffer, and I'm president of the district's newest affinity group, the Disability Advocacy and Rights Team. I'm providing comment today in regard to the district's return to workplace plan and my concern that the plan puts disabled employees at unnecessary risk. I've had many employees reach out to me concerned that they are being forced back into the office when they are at increased risk of death or hospitalization due to COVID-19. I take that concern very seriously, as I'm sure you do. The current plan does not allow any exemptions for employees with comorbidities for COVID-19. Since work from home continues to work for many employees, I requested to district management that the district consider allowing some employees to continue fully telecommuting if they had a valid medical reason. The HR department's response was basically no, unless the employee could produce a doctor's note specifically restricting them from office work. The HR department noted that these doctor's notes are very hard to come by. Based on my interactions, district management was not interested in offering an exemption, even though it's in their power to do so. I wanted to raise this issue to you today so you're aware and understand the effects of your SMT's policies. In the eyes of many disabled employees, this inflexible policy is inequitable to disabled employees. District management is forcing employees who are at increased risk of hospitalization and death to come into the office in the name of collaboration, not even their essential job functions. I completely understand if our essential job functions were not being met and we needed to come into the office, but just coming in for collaboration doesn't seem worth the risk if a disabled employee may be hospitalized or worse. I was disappointed in the district's responses to my requests, so I felt the duty to raise the issue to the board. The SMT is likely relying on public health department directives and OSHA guidance to guide their plan. But what needs to be mentioned is that disabled people have a long documented history of inequitable treatment in healthcare settings and public health decisions. These policies are written to protect the majority, not the most vulnerable. The disability community has long been critical of these decision makers for ignoring disabled people and essentially saying we're dispensable or worth sacrificing. Many chronically ill people feel left out and marginalized and are otherwise discouraged by this discourse because their disability is reduced or completely ignored. Physicians and public health decision makers speak to and for the able body. For those that are familiar with hazard mitigation, OSHA says the first step is always to try and remove the hazard completely. Then comes the engineering controls and other mitigations. But all of them, though, are less effective than removing the hazard outright. So to summarize, my request to the board is to consider directing your SMT to allow an exemption for the return to workplace plan. The exemption would only cover employees who are at increased risk of hospitalization or death due to COVID-19. In our eyes, it's not worth the lives of high-risk employees to bring us into the office simply for collaboration while the pandemic is still here. Full-time telecommuting provides a viable temporary alternative to remove the hazard completely from many jobs. We can't efficiently collaborate with our coworkers if we're afraid of contracting COVID while at work. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Max has raised a legitimate point. How are we addressing disabled employees? I mean, employees who have conditions which COVID could kill them or severely cause greater medical concerns.
But there's one more issue with that, and that is, there are folks that are disabled that would otherwise not be at risk, and how do we differentiate? And Max, you may be able to answer this. How would we get that clear that an individual is at this extra level of risk?
Director Mellon, if I can answer that, I think it's self-disclosure that the employee says in writing, I have this increased risk due to X, Y, Z factors, and then the district can decide what to do with that information.
I'm going to disagree with you, Max. Self-disclosure is fine, but there needs to be some sort of validation or verification to go along with that. And how would you address that?
Is that question to me, Director Mellon?
Yes.
I'm not an HR professional, so I'd leave it up to them to decide what's the appropriate method for that.
There's a legal framework for this under the Fair Employment and Housing Act and its federal counterpart. So I expect that we need to be compliant with the duty to accommodate reasonable accommodation, duty to accommodate an employee's disability. And if we have questions, to use the interactive process to resolve those questions. So this may be too detailed for an off-the-cuff response, but I do think that Max raises important issues to make sure that we're in compliance.
Well, we have Winnie here. Maybe she can address some of those.
So you're absolutely correct, Director Katz. We do follow and ask for documentation to inform us that an employee may have a medical condition that they need accommodation, and we do an interactive process. What I did share with Mr. Pfeffer, Max, I'm sorry, was that, there are some documentations that are very vague, and some doctors are not willing to indicate that this person has a restriction or recommend or have them not come into or interact. And then there are some that are very specific, indicating that this person cannot interact with anyone and they should continue isolating even though they are not COVID positive or have exposure. So it all depends. It's all case by case. I did express that there's some of the notes that we have seen have been very vague, right? And there are some doctors are saying, and some of the employees have provided documentation at the beginning of the pandemic, medical documentation to help us accommodate them. And then we did the whole, everybody telecommuted if possible. So now that we're coming back to work, we're still requiring the same thing that we've always required, is documentation, so that we can work with the employee case by case.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have two more speakers, Dave. Gus Chakala, should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Okay, good afternoon, Board of Directors, General Manager Chan. My name is Gus Chakala. I am an Associate Engineer in Pipeline Infrastructure Division. I'm also the liaison to the EOT for Local 2019. I'm speaking today to kind of express, similar to what Max has expressed, some fear from a lot of our employees, some disappointment in how the return to workplace plan is being implemented. I've asked in the EOT meetings, and I want to thank Mr. Briggs. He's been great in the meetings and listening to the unions, and I think bringing our feedback to the SMT and everything. But I don't know where the breakdown happens, but a lot of the issues we raise do not get implemented. And at the beginning of the pandemic, the tune was, we have to take a measured approach, as we send people home, as we start telecommuting, taking a measured approach. And I think we need to take a more measured approach to the return. The discussion around Max's comments kind of highlights that. We could talk about what's the minimum legally required for accommodations, but we've been successfully telecommuting for 2 years, a lot of us. If someone hasn't been successful in it, hopefully, the supervisor's been enacting the, procedure for discipline and, going through that process. But those of us that are still telecommuting have been doing it successfully for 2 years. In addition to the disabled employees, sorry for this background noise. I'm actually at the office today voluntarily. But in addition to, disabled employees, there's also people with small children at home who can't get vaccinated yet. And that's something that in the next, couple months, they will be able to. And these are people that have hunkered down, new moms, new dads that have hunkered down for the last 2 years. They don't, they still order their groceries at home. They don't go to parties, and they're being asked to come back, potentially weeks or months before they can get their children vaccinated. And I really request that we have a more measured approach to return. Like, sure, you need a doctor's note for medical accommodation, but self-attesting worked for religious exemptions to vaccination. I think it could work for saying you have people at home that are unable to get vaccinated, for saying you are immunocompromised and have a high risk of death. And we're in a transition, and I wish we would act more in the transition. This isn't a long-term, okay, if you have small children, don't ever come back to work. It's we recognize vaccines will be available in the next couple of months. It's we recognize increased risk of death. We're still in a declared state of emergency. You're not going to work from home forever, but it's I'm ready to come back. I'm vaccinated, I'm boosted, my kids are vaccinated. We went to Disneyland last week. It was great. I'm in the office now voluntarily, but there's a lot of people that are still hunkered down that we're leaving behind.
Yeah.
I think we need to recognize that we are in a transition, And even the district-wide plan says returning 1 to 2 days a week. A lot of departments have taken that to mean minimum 2 days a week. And I think we could take it slower. We've been successfully doing this for 2 years. I think another couple months to slowly ease back, to recognize people with small children, people with disabilities, give them that little extra time they need to truly come out of the pandemic. I'm feeling like the pandemic's pretty much over for me. It's like I said, I'm vaccinated, boosted, I'm doing things, but for a lot of people, they're getting left behind. The pandemic is not over for them. Thank you.
So maybe Winnie can respond to some of that as well.
So I just want to provide some clarification. So there are self-attestations for the religious exemptions as an example, but we do an interactive process and we actually talk with the employee and have a conversation before we even consider the exemption. So it's not just providing, this is what I believe in. There's actually interactive process as part of the exemption process. Same with medical. All medical exemptions came with a doctor's note for the vaccination. So it was not a blanket, I'm immunocompromised and I can't be vaccinated. All our medical exemptions are documentations provided from their healthcare provider. So it's still asking for providing the same criteria. Just recently, I think just even over the weekend, I've been talking to employees that are concerned about returning to work and have young children. And yes, there is not an exemption, but I have asked and I have even called their supervisors directly and say, what can you do to help with this person as they transition back? So we have been doing our best and even providing supervisors some flexibility if they felt they didn't have it, so we could have a more direct dialogue. And I've committed to that with quite a few employees and with their supervisors where they're going to work it out and figure out how to get them back. So we are working through this case by case as people are reaching out. A blanket policy, we have a lot of parents. I have a 3-year-old. I'm not seeking an exemption, but I'm figuring it out. If I have difficulty, I would relay to my supervisor, this is where I'm having difficulty, and hope that supervisor will work with me as we transition back. So this is what I'm asking employees to consider, and if you're having difficulty with those conversations, I'll be happy to help.
Thank you, Winnie.
I have one more question for Winnie. Thank you, Winnie, for the update. I'm wondering, have we gotten to the point where we have responded to an employee claiming a disability at this phase who has been working from home at some point during the last 2 years? Have we taken the position in any case that there is an undue hardship? And I'm not asking for any details about that. If there are details, I think that would be something we would possibly discuss in closed session. But I'm just interested if we've reached the point where somebody who has been telecommuting over the last 2 years, if we are saying that at this phase, we're saying that accommodation being requested to continue to work from home because of a disability is a COVID-related disability is an undue hardship. Is that going on right now?
No, it's not going on right now. We're still in the conversation interactive, and I think even the most recent one, someone who was immunocompromised, they're requesting with their supervisor to perhaps delay their return by a week or two to see so they can be in better contact and provide an updated doctor's note. They are a medical exempted employee from vaccination. So we're, as we say, we just take it step by step with everyone. There hasn't been no blanket denial saying, no, there's an undue hardship, we can't do this for you.
Yes, I understand that the process can be hard dialoguing with doctors. Not all doctors are the best medical legal writers, but sometimes they're in the best position to know what's going on with their patient. So I appreciate all of the work that we're doing to help employees through that process. And I know it's challenging to also compare that to all of employees, disabled and non-disabled, safety concerns, because we need to make sure that we have a safe environment for all of our employees, and especially make sure that we're accommodating employees with disabilities.
We have one more speaker for public comment. George Cleveland, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good afternoon, President Linney, members of the board, General Manager Chan, and anyone else who is attending this session. I wasn't planning to piggyback on what Max said, except that there was one point he made, which I will confirm, about the accessibility of getting the appropriate doctor's note being very hard, if not near impossible. I experienced that last year when I was looking for an accommodation to deal with, I don't like the word comorbidities because it has such a negative connotation, but health condition that concern me in terms of COVID. So currently I work in the office 1 day a week, and I'd like to keep that as long as possible. Our local leadership met with management over this repeatedly over the past months. And of course, we do thank Mr. Briggs for meeting with us because, open and transparent and just listening to us is a good thing. I'm concerned that one of the things that seems to be the reason for her coming back is collaboration. I'm not quite certain how effective that is when we're required to wear masks all day, every day, when we're in the office, however many times we are in the office. So that's, I'm not quite sure if that, I think that might hinder the idea of collaboration. For our members, there are a lot, as Gus mentioned, we have members who have people who cannot get vaccinated and their families. By doing this, bringing them back, from a standpoint of physical well-being, less sleep, because you have to get up and you have to get on the road, more traffic on the freeways, more pollution in the environment. Parking, we've been assured that there's going to be enough, but I remain skeptical just because of how we make sure that we're not too overcrowded during these times. Staggering things, okay. It sounds interesting, but then when you hear that an entire division of 53 people is going to be in the office on Mondays and Tuesdays, it just gives pause to how staggered are we in terms of coming into the office, and who's going to do what, and how are we going to meet people, and what are we going to do, and how about the building occupancy? Are there limits? No, there aren't. And apparently not in the elevators either, but it's still, people are justifiably skittish about coming back because we're still in an emergency and COVID is still there. So why would we jeopardize our folks at all for any reason until the executive orders from the governor are lifted saying it's not an emergency anymore? I don't understand what the rush is. I don't understand where February 28th came from as the date to do this. As Gus said in his remarks, we've been telecommuting successfully now for 2 years. And I think we still need a more measured approach. I don't see the need. If there are folks that really want to get off of telecommute, they don't want to do it anymore, then so see if you can accommodate those people, those folks, those employees, regardless of whether they are Local 2019 members or not. I just don't see the efficacy of this. It seems like there's a rush to get people in for some reason. Do people need to have their work monitored? Is that it? But the collaboration thing, and it's uncomfortable.
George, your 3 minutes have concluded. If you could wrap up your comments, please.
Thank you, Risha. I just want to say that we don't push this back, and just remember that it's not a good thing for anybody right now. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands for public comment.
Any other director comments or questions?
Dave, do you have anything else?
I just want to applaud, Winnie and Dave for taking an approach that, at least from, and I get it's not, again, not easy, that getting back, returning, as I'm here for the first time, and I can't remember when I know there was 1 or 2 meetings that we did back in when we thought maybe it's over. This isn't going away. you know, it's going to change and it's going to morph. And I think the case-by-case basis to figuring out exemptions and accommodations and being flexible makes sense. And that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing flexibility. I hope all of our supervisors are pushing for that flexibility where it's possible and not feeling like there's a hard, bright line that affects everybody. And, you know, I think that's the best we can do. But I think that it's not just collaboration. It's normal, some level of normalcy that we crave, and it's a new normal. But, you know, we have all suffered over the last 2 years in the ways that our lives have changed, and we have found aspects of it that are cool and enjoyable, and found ways of doing things that we were skeptical about before that we will now become part of how we do business. And that's great. But I think we also need to find those things that we did before and remember what it was like to have an in-person meeting.
Here, here.
With your coworkers and with colleagues and with, you know, other people. So I think I feels like time to me, and I'm, you know, very much in support of the plan.
And I'll just quickly add on to this. I mean, you know, Dave, Winnie, the entire senior management team, I mean, a lot of people behind this just to try to make it work. We are trying to take this more very measured approach. We've communicated the February 28th date well in advance. We're trying to be as flexible as we possibly can. We've also shared with the unions and met with them, and you know, our long-term plan. When COVID is all over, you know, are people going to be back in the office 5 days a week? And the answer is, we've shared with them the plan, and the answer is no. You know, the world is different. We learned a lot, and there's going to be a lot of working from home. So we tried to be as transparent as possible with, this is the transition step. This is what the long term will look like. And in this transition step, you know, we know that there's going to be some people anxious. We're trying to be as flexible as possible and understand the anxiety, whether they still have small children that can't get vaccinated or other types of issues. And there's a process that Winnie described on how to work through those particular issues. But there is value in having people back together. I mean, I can just attest to it right now, just having some board members here, or just with you know, lots of different aspects of the work that we do in our general lives in general. So appreciate the board support. And thank you again, Dave, Winnie, and really the entire team. There's a lot of people behind this. Okay, moving on, thank you. Our last report is our water supply update. We finally did have some rain, albeit very light rain, but it did break the streak of consecutive days of no measurable precipitation. But I do think January and February will probably be the driest 2 months on record still. We'll see that once February is over. There is a weak system forecast for the end of the month, although there's not a lot of precipitation forecasts. At the next board meeting on March 8th, I'll provide a drought update to discuss our plans to begin taking transfer water to help us prepare if the following year is dry. But for today, we have our water supply update, which will be presented by Dave Briggs.
Okay, hello again. Thank you, Clifford. And I'm going to just jump to slide 3 and get right into it. So as Clifford mentioned, yeah, somewhat of a dubious record here. January and February back-to-back, those 2 months. If the rest of the month, which is basically a week, doesn't yield too much more precipitation, it will be the driest we've ever recorded in that 2-month span in our watershed. Luckily, though, it was preceded by some very wet conditions, October and December mostly. So it has tempered the last bare bones hydrology a little bit. So more on that in a minute when you see the latest tallies. But I also wanted to mention to the board that we've adjusted our runoff forecast. So for years at East Bay Mud, we've had tools and correlations and data that have correlated if we have such and such snowpack and precipitation, how much ends up in the river and how much ends up in our reservoirs. Those correlations, that math broke down last year, probably because soil moisture was off the charts. We did have precipitation last year, but most of it fell as snow. Relatively speaking, a relative disproportionate amount fell as rain. And so that may have led to, not only in the McKelvey watershed, but in other watersheds, that may have led to, when the snow did melt, the uptake from vegetation, evapotranspiration, as well as just replenishing local groundwater next to the river, probably took a lot of the river water away, and it didn't end up in our reservoir or in the CVP's reservoirs or in the state's reservoirs. So we've accounted for that. So we expect if the same phenomena were to happen again this year, we'd be able to better predict it. And we have baked these improvements into our latest forecast, which you'll see in a minute. As Clifford mentioned, we did turn Freeport back on earlier in the month. We're diverting water as fast as we can right now. So this is our last year's CVP supply, contract year 21. We anticipate being able to divert all, if not mostly all, of the 35,000 plus that was given to us by Reclamation by March 31st. And that was accomplished, or will be accomplished, because Reclamation allowed us to go 1 month into the next contract year, which for the CVP starts on March 1st. So meanwhile, we're waiting with bated breath at Reclamation's next announcement, which is anticipated tomorrow, where it will reveal the contract allocations, preliminary contract allocations for its contractors. We are anticipating at best health and safety levels for municipal and industrial contracts like the district. That may not yield much for East Bay Mud. There are other M&I contractors who do not have as much storage as us, and they may get preferential treatment, but we will see in about 24 hours, and I'm sure Clifford will report that news immediately to you once we hear about it. Otherwise, if the skies do open up, and as Clifford mentioned, not a great deal of excitement in the 2-week forecast, but at best, we can possibly see the weakening of this ridge that's over the state right now, maybe some instability in the atmosphere, maybe the doors open, but that's really just wishful thinking at this point. We'll see what happens. But if it does get wetter, we will be able to walk back some of these actions that we're getting ready to pull the trigger on. Okay, so just production-wise, which the water coming out of our treatment plants, which is indicative of demand, of course, from customers. You can see the response that we're seeing in January and February, shown in red there, well above last year, as we've experienced very dry hydrology and warm temperatures. Of course, most of the water production is west of hills. That's just the way our demand is split. But we are seeing a more rapid increase in demand on the east side. Not surprising. Not a lot to show here. I wish I could, but we have not recorded much in January and February in our watershed. But if you look at the top, you can see that 30 plus inches is about average, but that of course is dropping every day. But again, just a result of the plentiful October and December, which were still kind of which has somewhat negated the really bad hydrology in January and February. Similar locally, actually 0 in February, although we may have picked up a trace last night. Depending on where you were in the service area, you may have picked up a raindrop or two, but I think we did record a trace. And this not reflected here yet, but still about average. The snowpack is shown here in red. It is well below the average, which is in the dashed orange line. So the snowpack is melting. We're hoping that with some rainfall preceding and being coincident with this snow, that the watershed is a bit more primed and not quite as thirsty, if you will, to soak up that snow melt when it does start to melt and wind up in the river. So we are a little bit more optimistic that we'll see more of this. Even though the snowpack is actually below last year, we are anticipating, even with all the corrections that I spoke about earlier, we're anticipating more runoff in the watershed than last year because of the rain received so far and because the snowpack is halfway decent. Storage-wise, we're at almost 530,000 acre feet. That's inching up from 2 weeks ago, but still not clearly what we want. And most of that storage hole is felt in Comanche. We're doing pretty good locally. Statewide, you can see that the water content across the Sierra is now well below average. The 66% in the Northern Sierra is a little bit worrisome. That's because that's where the CVP is going to look most heavily with Trinity and Shasta. Shasta is very low right now. So that is probably what is a chief concern for the Bureau of Reclamation. Central Sierra, that includes Oroville, so state is not much better off. And then
Dave, the picture that you have in the last one, is that a basically a fairly accurate picture in terms of the actual snow, the white stuff there?
Oh, no, that's just, yeah,
It's just-
sometimes traditionally, or sometimes, Director Linney, we do show actual data from satellites that do show the amount of snow content and water content, and it's color coded so you can see how the content. No, this is just a standard photo backdrop.
Okay. Thanks.
Remembering 2 weeks ago, those numbers were in the 80s 2 weeks ago, in the mid 80s, mid
Yeah,
even
they
high
were
80s.
roughly, yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be actually toggle to just so we can see the
Yeah.
when you do the statewide, it would be helpful.
Yeah, I could certainly do that next time. I could even take it further back because it does start. If you started in January, these would be like 160, 180%, and yeah, they've been basically every 2 weeks they've been dropping probably 10 or 15%.
Right.
Okay, so last two slides here, you see that the precipitation in the watershed totaled so far is about 30 inches. So if it does turn wet, we'll probably be above average. That would be great. Average gets us from here on out. Median hydrology will get us relatively close to historic median. But we have been tracking a 99% exceedance for the past 6 weeks. Very, next to no precipitation. So we are hoping for a change here. And statistically speaking, it will come. As I mentioned, I think in one of the presentations before, the lowest amount of precipitation we've ever recorded in the McElmy watershed after January 1st was, I think, about 8 inches or so. And we've gotten about less than 1. So, we're hoping this is not the new normal, and we hope we're still on our charts here, and that we'll get a miracle March or even a miracle April. And then finally, just looking at projected storage, we've crept up, as I've said, just in the past couple weeks, and you can see a wet hydrology. If we were to suddenly switch to that, we'd still fill the system going into next year. Median hydrology from here on out still puts us in fantastic shape. The 90% is below 500, and the 99, in case you were interested, is probably in the low 400s at this point. The 99% hydrology would probably still be at least 10 inches of precipitation.
Abe, is that 470,000 acre feet? Does that include what our imports will be from Freeport? So are we looking at 470 or are we looking at 470 plus 35?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so that does include us. That does include the allocation from reclamation that we're pumping right now. It doesn't include any transfer water or any allocation from reclamation. I guess we're not quite to the next contract year, but contract year 22, it doesn't assume anything further from reclamation and no transfer supplies. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So as I mentioned, on March 8th, we'll bring a drought update that will talk about how some of these transfers might move forward. I don't have any other reports for the general manager's report.
I wanted just to comment, Clifford, as they gave that report, back when we started out with all these alternate water supplies, we had no idea there would be curtailment of those. We thought we were having an abundance of water so that even in a drought, our constituents, the ones we represent, could have ample water to do whatever they please. We wouldn't think that the drought would disturb our folk that we represent at all. And that was why we collected all of these. But all of them now have restrictions on them as to how much we can take. That wasn't part of the deal when we got permission to do that, to go out and find all these new water sources. And so that's one of the wrinkles. That's one of the battles that we have to fight. Our staff has to continually tool up the people who control us because they, in fact, limit our ability, and all the money that we put in to do this, they don't realize that history. many of them weren't even around when some of these things were done and put together. So the communication, continual teaching and changing information is what brings us out and sometimes increases what we're allowed to take from those different venues where we are able to bring water to our constituency here in East Bay Mud. That's the urban water source. And of course, it gets targeted more to do more everything than the agris are required to do. And that's a battle that continues. But I think education, information, relationships, whatever we can do to further that and bring those messages is very important, because our advancement is being pulled back. We're too far up front, and that's what it looks like. But as such, they should be relying on us for information that comes direct from the front, not anything that was speculated on by doing something. We have the actual experience, and we have the actual results of our effort, but we're limited to what we can do with it. And I just want to continue to make those points, because that's what we have to do going forward. That's why I try to reach out to people and give them some histrionics, because that's what we were founded on. That's what we counted on. And we did all this so that we'd be ahead of the game water-wise.
Thank you, Director Patterson.
That's it for the general manager's report.
That is it.
Okay, we'll now move to reports and director comments. We received reports from this morning's Finance and Administration Committee, the Long-Term Supply Workshop, and the UMRWA meeting and Los Vaqueros meetings. Director Patterson, you want to tell us about the Finance Committee?
Yes. We had a great meeting this morning, and we had 2 months worth of roll forward. You approved that in the when you approved items earlier today on the consent calendar. I think the reporting was actually positive, and the plan going ahead related to interest rate swap and the future financial plan, bond sales, all those things were brought forth to us. The retiree system, that information was all brought to us for our recommendation to you, and you approved that already. Everything is rolling forward. I want to say, for me, it's a good feeling to be here at this time at East Bay Mud, and our financial people continue to represent us well. They keep us in tune. But as I pointed out, we don't have an abundance of money. We have what we've been able to work through carefully and keep the plan together that takes us forward. That's the foundation of it. Without funding, we would go nowhere. And to be in position to receive these grants and everything else rolling down the pipe. So I wanted to salute the staff. Again, they've given us some of the best agencies to help us with our bond folio and given us all the strategic things that we need to make the right moves for the district. That's it. Barry, you were wonderful too, bringing forth what you did as it related to our audit and how they met muster, even over to the retirement board.
All right, thanks, Bill. For our long-term water supply workshop, the board received an outline of key challenges facing the district's long-term water supplies. new and updated information on the strategy for continuing to make the district's water supply portfolio both resilient and sustainable. And just point out that we didn't get through all the materials, but it was very excellent information, and we will be Director Ullman, you want to tell us about UMRWA?
President Lenny, you're fading out.
Did I go over something, or did we receive the report fine?
Yes, we received that report and you ended with, we didn't get the entire report, but we're going to come back to it.
That's right. We're gonna continue at another date, the workshop. And then I was tossing it over to Director Coleman for the UMRWA and Los Vaqueros.
UMRWA meeting on January 28th, and Director Patterson attended. We had an update on forest projects, McCulmy watershed maintenance projects, and the MAC plan, as well as our grant opportunities. Richard Sykes, who used to be here, whose executive director, is doing a great job helping lead UMRWA. Los Vaqueros was February 9th, and it was really more of an issue of approving some of our authority bylaws and purchasing policies. In addition to that, I've been appointed to the Finance Committee of Los Vaqueros JPA. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Other items for future consideration, please submit to the general manager. And now, before we have an adjournment, is there any director comments?
Nice to be here in person.
Yeah.
All right. So today we're gonna.
I'll second that, Marguerite. It's good to be here in person.
They're on.
I look forward to joining you. This has been a rather disjointed way to run a meeting, and appreciate everyone's patience with that. I think it'll be nice to be all in one place at the next meeting. So we will adjourn today's meeting in memory of Bishop Ernestine Cleveland Reams and former Freeport Regional Water Authority Program Manager Forrest Williams Jr. Bishop Reams passed in December 2021, and Mr. Williams passed on February 12th. And I'll ask Director Patterson to provide some remarks for Bishop Cleveland Reams.
Yes, thank you. Let me just say that this was a distinguished member of my ward, and our relationship dates back through my wife to Bishop Ernestine Reams coming in the world back in Oklahoma. Dell's mother was a Dunlap, and Bishop Ernestine Reams was a Cleveland, and they were together in Oklahoma, the families. Bishop Reams is named after Dell's mother, Ernestine, her first name. That's how close the families were. They would be joined together here in California, and Bishop Reams' family moved into California earlier than Dell's family, but they came together around her father, Elmer Elijah, and his wife, Matilda Cleveland. And Elmer founded Ephesians Church in Berkeley, and that's where they would gather for worship. Ernestine Reams, of course, became a traveling preacher. And when she traveled to every major city across the country with her brother, Reverend Elmer Cleveland Jr., to preach the gospel at a time when women were not allowed in the pulpit or church leadership. I think that's important to state, because she never let that stop her. And Ernestine and Paul built their life on the pillars of commitment, consistency, and concentration. Consecration, I'm sorry. In 1968, Reams purchased an old shoe store in Oakland, California, in a drug-infested neighborhood. She then traveled across the country to evangelize and raise money to open a church on the property. That church would be the Center of Hope Community Church just off MacArthur Boulevard, and it exceeded 1,500 congregants by 2000. Reams worked to help those marginalized by society to re-assimilate. In 1973, the U.S. Army requested that Pastor Reams minister to the soldier stationed in West Germany and honored her with the rank of 5-star general. In 1990, she opened a 56-unit senior housing complex, the E.E. Cleveland Manor. She purchased a 17-unit facility to operate a transitional housing program for homeless single women with children. In 1992, combining federal and city funds with private donations, Reams purchased and remodeled a dilapidated motel and rebuilt it into a home that offered job training and child care. 1998, E.C. Reams Garden, a 150-unit affordable housing complex. She inaugurated the C. Reams Academy of Technology Art Charter School in Oakland, a child-centered community learning environment dedicated to developing academic excellence in core subjects, leadership, technology, and to promote the arts and community service. I want to say by 2000, she managed more than $18 million for various social programs and had transformed the neighborhood near her church. Bishop Reams was recognized for her work and sacrifice with awards such as Outstanding Service in Religion Award, Alameda Contra Costa Innovators, Top 100 Black Businesses and Professional Women in America, Humanitarian Award for Outstanding Leadership in Untiring Service to Mankind. And she was a Woman of the Year for the Urban League. Those are just a few. Bishop Reams passed away on December 29, 2021 at the age of 92. She changed lives. She changed Oakland. She gave hope to thousands of East Bay residents. Her life and her work were dedicated to the service of people, community, and God. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Director Coleman.
Great, thank you, Rishi. If you can put up the notes for what I have. It's for adjournment of the meeting for Forrest Williams Jr. and Bill Patterson and I served on Freeport Regional Water Authority for a number of years, at which Forrest was involved, and Clifford and David and Michael from staff worked with Forrest in many close ways. I'm not going to read the entire thing. I'm just going to read a couple of the paragraphs, and you can follow along if you'd like. Forrest Williams Jr., the program manager for the Freeport Regional Water Authority and longtime employee with the Sacramento County Water Agency, SACWA, passed away at his home on February 12, 2022. I'm jumping down to the last three paragraphs now. When he wasn't busy with Freeport, Forrest led the development of SACWA's metering and conservation programs and supported SACWA's interests with state and federal legislation. Whatever he was working on, Forrest was a great collaborator and communicator, professional, knowledgeable, and honest. All who worked with and encountered Forrest were sure to hear about his family. Eventually, all the conversations with Forrest gravitated towards personal stories. In particular, stories involved his wife Melody and growing daughters Jasmine and Raven. To say he was immensely proud of them would be an understatement. As EBMUD employees and customers, we'll miss Forrest for his being as a collaborator and a driver for vital infrastructure that we created to serve the public. As individuals, we'll miss Forrest for his wonderful person he was, and we'd like to say thank you for enriching our lives, Forrest. He was a true gentleman.
Thank you, John.
I join you, John. I join you. Forrest was some kind of man. He really was. We were privileged to know him and work with him.
Exactly.
Thank you, and both are certainly worthy of our recognition today as we close the meeting. The next regular meeting of the board will be held Tuesday, March 8th, 2022 at 1:15 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned in memory of Bishop Ernestine Cleveland Reams and Forrest Williams Jr. Thank you.